Strike here on VSiN. I'm your host, Dave Ross. For the next hour, I'm going to break down UFC Vegas 80 right here, of course, in Las Vegas. The UFC was off for a week, so we were off for a week, but we are back in business. Lou Finocchiaro is going to join me momentarily alongside Kuhn, Dan Vreeland, and Jordan Sherwood out of Chicago as the hour goes. But without further ado, let's bring in the man. You know him, you love him, Lou Finocchiaro. Lou, always great to have you back in the program, my friend. You can follow him on Twitter or X, as I do, at Gamblou, the host of the About Business podcast. Lou, how'd you do for the week? Did you just take a week off from the UFC, or were you still already looking ahead to this card a week ago?
No, it was great to have just almost a week off. I start my UFC weeks on Saturday, and this week, Saturday held no UFC fights, so I got some Sunday work done as well. But I stay at it for the most part, 24/7, 365. I don't have young kids anymore, and I don't golf, and so this is what I do, and I love doing it. And I also appreciate the fact that you guys over there at First Strike have me on to talk about the fights with you each week.
One of the very best. That's why we love having you on to have these conversations. Let's talk about the main event here in Las Vegas with the return of the King, Bobby Green. But he's a big-time underdog against Grant Dawson. And obviously, we know this, Lou. We talk about it in boxing through the decades, and now in the UFC, you see it as well in mixed martial arts. Styles make fights. We've got a wrestler in Grant Dawson. We've got a striker in Bobby Green. Do we have a live dog, or do you think at 445, Grant Dawson should be this big a fave?
Yeah, I think this is a really, really tough position for Bobby Green. I have nothing but respect for Bobby Green. He is as authentic as the Diaz brothers, and I can't give a higher compliment to a kid than that. He comes from the street. He's a professional fighter. He shows up against everyone. He fought a great striker in Fiziev some fights back. Many thought he won. I thought he won. And he does great in space on the feet where he can use his athleticism. He's into his later 30s now. Some of that athleticism is waning. And against a guy like Islam Makhachev, the champ, Bobby was really not much match. Grant Dawson has aspirations to fight for the lightweight title. He sees what Makhachev did to Bobby Green and finished him in one. And that's the template and the focus by which Grant enters this fight. I believe he has every tool to take Bobby Green apart before this fight ends. I just can't tell you if it's going to be as fast as Makhachev did it, but I look for a systematic breakdown here, taking nothing away from Bobby Green. He's authentic, he's a great fighter, but he is ill-equipped to deal with this grappling pressure.
There it is, and you laid it out there. When you look at the total rounds prop here, 4.5, it is juiced heavily to the under here of 4.5 to your end, and the thought process here of Dawson possibly getting this done before it hits the scorecards there. Would you look, because I know you're not in the business of laying almost, $4.5, $5 faves on a weekly card. Would you look at the win by finish prop at minus $1.35, or do you worry that this does somehow hit the cards and then you're looking at a decision? You can get plus money if you think it goes all five, and I know you're not in that camp at plus 235. If you don't want to get too tricky with a KO or a sub, would you just play the win by finish and lay the $1.35?
I would be looking for inside the distance. I don't like when they make me pick submission or TKO. I don't like that. And when I can't see that at DraftKings, but at Bet Online, excuse me for mentioning a place far away, they have inside the distance as Grant Dawson like minus 350, which is really tough. Interestingly enough, in their points handicap, Dawson minus 5.5 points. Now, if Dawson were to win by finish, you'd win that bet. That's minus 290 at the same location. So it pays to scour through these props to get your best price, because I just soon lay the minus 5.5 with Dawson at minus 290 than inside the distance at 350, and you'll get paid the same way.
And one other way possibly to go, if somebody out there believes that King Green's got a puncher's chance to get a KO, you could play the fight doesn't go the distance without picking a winner at minus 250 as well. So to Lou's point, there's many different ways to get a similar price tag if you don't want to lay that big number there of 445 that we're seeing today. So there are many different ways to get at this, but that's why Lou's one of the best in the biz. You're trying to look at ways to shorten those price tags and not play the bigger one. To that end, though, Lou, very quickly, and I know you're not on the side of Bobby King Green here, is the only pathway to victory a KO, and you can get him at plus $5 instead of the, around plus three north of $3 just for him to win anyway. Is it got to be by KO at 5-1?
No, I think it would have to be by a decision.
Oh.
I don't see Bobby Green having that kind of power. Grant Dawson, some fights back, was it Leonardo? He fought a Brazilian striker and it took him till the last 10 seconds of the fight. Leonardo Santos took him till the last few seconds of the fight to win. I just don't see Bobby Green. This is a terrible matchup for him. And anyone considering Bobby Green, I would really strongly consider taking you off of him. But if you had to have him, it would be via decision, because he would toe tap and stay at distance and make Dawson look slow. I just don't know that can happen.
Plus 850 for Bobby Green to get it done via decision. Lou, let's look to the co-main event here. Joe Pfeiffer back in there against Abdul Razak Al Hassan, and it's almost identical numbers that we're looking at here, with Al Hassan being the real big dog here, plus 350. Joe coming in right at the same price tag that we're seeing with Grant Dawson, actually a little bit north of that at 455, 445 for Grant Dawson. So again, we're seeing these some fight cards. You get those the numbers are pretty closely aligned. In the co-main and the main, they are not. And again, similar style here at a much younger fighter and Pfeiffer at 27, and Abdul here coming in at 38. What's your take on this one?
I can't wait for this fight. This fight intrigues me, and it intrigues me because I look at Pfeiffer as having all kinds of blue sky talent, but he surely hasn't been tested. The fact that he beat up on Mearshart and then grappled him in a grappling contest shows me that Pfeiffer knows that he's got big, huge power in his hands, but he's inexperienced. He's somewhat premeditated, a lot of power, and he needs to work on his grappling. Meanwhile, you're looking at a judo kid in Al Hassan that knows completely and directly that the UFC has set him in front of this guy as a stepping stone and or a barometer. And at 38, he don't like it. And he's been in with big, strong strikers before. I view Al Hassan as dangerous and live as he can be. And I think this could be a PhD fight for Joe Pfeiffer if he goes in and gets caught with one. And I like Al Hassan. Is it the same 1 unit bet that I would make on every other dog of maybe plus 120, 130? Of course not. But there's probably going to be a position here on Al Hassan just because he's a dog and he's backed into a corner, and I like that position for an underdog.
Feels like a very live dog right now with Al Hassan right now. So again, right around plus 350 there. Again, if you like him via KO, TK, or DQ, a little bit north of that there, plus 450 for the big dog in this one. When you look at the Joaquin Buckley, Alex Morono fight, it feels like completely different styles, right? Buckley can be this wild man in the octagon, highlight real KOs. Morono, just steady as she goes, keeps coming forward, and somehow seems to be able to absorb punishment, but yet keep going. Do we have another live dog here right now, Alex, about plus $1.54? The numbers come down as the week has gone on.
Yeah, in this matchup, Dave, what I worry about is really what Morono's biggest challenge has been is the ability to absorb a huge punch. I mean, if he can clasp on, clasp against, or get to the floor, he really stands great opportunity. However, at distance with a spark plug like Buckley, I really worry for him because Buckley's explosive. He's powerful. He's really been working on his game, especially grappling coming into this fight. I regard Buckley as a pretty dangerous guy for Morono here. This ain't a great matchup for Alex.
Yeah, if he cannot withstand the punishment, it's going to come from Buckley. And again, you see the total rounds prop juiced to the under minus $1.75 to your point. So if you think this fight can go past 2.5 rounds, you can get some over money there at plus $1.45. Speaking of explosive, got a lot of them here in the main card. Drew Dober back in there against Ricky Glenn. I mean, Dober is one of the more exciting guys you're going to see in this weight class here at 155, and it shows in the numbers, minus 440. Again, very similar to the first two fights we talked about. Should Drew be this big a favor against Ricky?
No, he should be a firm favorite against Ricky, but Ricky doesn't come, Tommy. He's not deaf, dumb, and blind kid going into the octagon, for crying out loud. He does have tools, and the tool that I worry most about for Dober is the one that he doesn't utilize or practice, and that's intelligence. He's too willing to take a flush shot, and those kinds of fighters have a shelf life. And you can tell when they're going to start to go because they start to get hit and put out. And that loss to Frivola may be worse for Drew Dober than what we even imagined back then. We'll have to see what happens here. I don't know that I'm advocating the underdog here, but I got a fade flag out for Dober.
Well, one thing I picked up there is you're telling me Ricky Glenn sure plays a mean pinball. Very well done, Lou Finocchiaro. You've got about 30 seconds. Tell the people what they get when they tune in each and every week to the About Business podcast.
They get final releases after the weigh-ins have occurred. So we got all the last-minute information. Do our best to give you profitable positions. Each week there's a UFC card. And Dave and First Strike guys, thanks so much. This production is outstanding, and I'm pleased to be on it.
Have you ever seen the Who in concert?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Oh, I knew it. I knew it. I picked up.
I'm an old rock and roller. You bet, especially the Who. I love Town.
Lou, love the conversation each and every week. Enjoy those fights on Saturday. Make them profitable, my friend. When we come back and go to DC, going to catch up with Reed Kuhn next here on First Strike. DraftKings Sportsbook is giving you plenty of ways to bet the UFC. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app. You're going to be able to bet on more than just the main event. DraftKings has great odds on fight lines, total rounds, and features for all MMA events. Eligibility restrictions do apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for all the terms and conditions. We will get to Reed Kuhn in Washington, D.C. in just a minute. We're going to go up to Boston now and catch up with our guy, Dan Vreeland. You can follow him on X as I do, at Gumby Vreeland. Dan, will you tell the people all the other places that they can catch you on if they need more UFC content from you?
Yeah, of course. You can catch me on the Top Total MMA podcast, which I've hosted for the last 7 years. This week we're interviewing Johnny Munoz, who's fighting this weekend, as well as a fighter from LFA in the main event, Landry Ward. And I also run the SGPN's MMA podcast, the MMA Gambling Podcast, which gives you a fight-by-fight breakdown of it all. And we do a Dana White's Contender Series or a regional show each week, too. And then I write for the Sports Gambling Podcast Network and Cage Side Press.
Is that it?
That's it for the time being. Yeah. Give me a week. I'll find something else.
You're the hardest working man in MMA. I absolutely love it. Want to get your thoughts on this card here and start off with a wild man, I would say, is a good way to describe Ian Cutelaba. And he is a small favorite against Philippe Lins. Right now, minus $1.48 is what I'm seeing. And the comeback here in Philippe is plus $1.40. Tell me if you think we've got a live dog, because Cutelaba, kind of indifferent sometimes inside the octagon. You don't know what you're going to get. He is 9 years the junior, though, of Philippe Lins.
Yeah, I feel like you never know what you're going to get with Cutelaba here, but I even feel like the best version of Cutelaba would have trouble with Felipe Lins. Like, I think Felipe Lins, since coming down to 205 pounds, has been wildly underrated. In his 3 fights at 205 pounds, first of all, he's undefeated, which seems like it's really important. And also, he's never given up a takedown. And he's fought guys like Maxim Grishin, who, granted, might have a little bit worse wrestling than Ian Cutelaba, but he went 0 for 3 against them in the wrestling in that department. So knowing all of that about Felipe Lins, it's kind of shocking to me that he comes in here again as a dog against Cutelaba, who, like you said, if he comes out at his best version, it's not a bad version, particularly for light heavyweight. But if he can't get that takedown and he keeps struggling for that takedown, as sometimes he does, I imagine a really tired version of him against Felipe Lins late in the fight. Not to mention, Linz himself has been scoring a lot of takedowns at 205 pounds too. He's got 5 in the 3 fights that he's got. Give him a little top time there to wear out Kudalaba, and I think he is by far the better fighter in this one.
So, Dan, when I hear you say later on in the fight, and you don't see this a whole lot here, where you can get a total rounds prop here for a 3-round fight for big guys at a round and a half. Because, look, we're normally expecting in the heavier weight classes, you have more propensity for knockouts. At least that's always in theory. It doesn't always play out that way. Are we live here at even money for over 7.5 minutes?
I definitely think so. Because first of all, like, not that Linz doesn't have knockout power, especially before he came to the UFC. We saw he had quite a bit of knockout power. Since coming to the UFC, 3 of his 5 fights have gone the distance. He's only finished 1 himself. And yeah, Kudalaba, like I said before, is a guy who comes out like a bat out of hell sometimes. The other half of the time, he comes out looking like he doesn't know what he's doing, right? And so he has been finished quick. He has gotten finishes quick. But really, if you want to go back to any time he's fought somebody with like significant wrestling defense, somebody like Devin Clark, somebody like Dustin Jacoby, both of those fights went to the decision. So I really do think that as long as Linz's takedown defense holds up here and he kind of wears on Kudalaba, over a round and a half should be easy money.
I love that idea. And again, looking at that at even money for 7.5 minutes, if you think it might hit the cards in general, plus 250 without even picking a winner. So maybe if you're picking up what Dan's putting down there, it could be some value in a couple of those plays. There's some prominent women, rather, on this card. It starts off with the very first fight of the night, Montana De La Rosa against J.J. Aldridge. Pretty evenly aligned here in this one. We know how tough that De La Rosa can be, and the same for JJ. What do you make of this first fight here? Because I'm seeing about, minus $1.30 right now in De La Rosa.
Yeah, I am leaning towards Aldrich here. And the reason why I'm leaning towards Aldrich is I think if her takedown defense holds up, she's going to have a massive advantage on the feet here. Like, De La Rosa is a very good wrestler. She's good when she can get people on the mat. But we've seen if she can't get people on the mat or she can't hold them there, which is the other bigger piece here, she doesn't win those fights, right? Like, obviously she wasn't going to take Tatiana Suarez down. She was always going to have a grappling disadvantage there. But she also couldn't hold Macy Barber in place at any point in time. Macy Barber winds up dominating her. You could say the same thing about when she fought Mayra Buena Silva, which Mayra Buena Silva wasn't as good at flyweight as she has showed to be at bantamweight. Same thing. She got her down once or twice, but couldn't hold her there. And I think people sleep on how hard it is to hold JJ Aldrich down because, while she's lost some fights and been taken down, in her last 3 fights, she's lost 2 out of 3, and she's been taken down in every single one of them, or rather 2 out of 3 of them. The person who couldn't take her down was Erin Blanchfield. She stuffed a bunch of takedowns from Erin Blanchfield. So now I'm supposed to sit there and believe that Montana De La Rosa is different and is going to be able to hold her down for a significant period of time. I don't think it's going to happen. I think you're going to see JJ Aldrich open up with the hand.
Interesting. And again, opening up with the hands could lead to a stoppage. Or do you think because she's going to be able to avoid those takedowns, do we get a 3 rounds on the feet and hit a judge's scorecard?
I think this one's probably on the feet. I mean, she's got 1 TKO in her career, or at least going through her, I believe it's her UFC career. She's got 1 TKO, and it was her last fight against Na Liang. Na Liang is notorious for just going for it with her grappling and then being absolutely exhausted 4 seconds later. She went 0-3 or 0-4 in the UFC and just clearly doesn't have it. So I don't think this one is going to be a stoppage either way, really. I don't think De La Rosa is going to get Aldrich out of there either. So I think, the over is clearly in play here. The goes to the judges' scorecards is the play. And regardless of what fighter you want to take them by decision.
Let's get to the strawweight division here because Karolina Kowalkiewicz, her UFC career is rather fascinating. Looked like, title challenger, then a terrible losing streak. Looked like she's going to be out of the UFC. And it looks like she's kind of reinvented herself here at 37 years young. And she's a rather solid favorite here against Diana Belbita. And Belbita right now, she's coming in at plus $1.40. Karolina minus $1.66. Is Belbita live or do you like the fave here?
No, I think the favorite is being wildly undervalued here. And really the big piece for me is just the strength of schedule. If you go through and you look at the 5 fights that Diana Belbita has had in the UFC, her toughest fight is Molly McCann. And we've talked about how Molly McCann's grappling simply seems not to be up to snuff. Molly McCann won that fight largely by out-grappling Diana Belbita. She had 5 takedowns in that fight. And, I don't think very highly of Molly McCann's wrestling. Meanwhile, we're talking about Karolina Kowalkiewicz, who is somebody who does have good wrestling, somebody who we've seen do excellent work on the mat, and who's really good at dictating where the fight goes. You take that fight with Vanessa Demopoulos. she decided she wasn't going to go to the ground with Vanessa Demopoulos, and she did a damn good job of staying there. You could say the same thing about how she sort of manhandled Silvana Gomez Juarez and took her to the mat and won the fight there. I mean, I think her wrestling plays really well against somebody like Belbicha, who has been taken down by worse wrestlers. And I think, that big losing streak that Kovalkiewicz had that made kind of everybody write her off, which, in retrospect, Jessica Andrade, Yan Xiaonan, Alexa Grasso, not a bad losing streak. I think the 3-fight winning streak says more about her recently. So I'm all over Kovalkiewicz here.
It is amazing to see how some fighters can have renaissance. We saw it with Andrei Arlovsky in the heavyweight division. We're seeing it again with Karolina Kovalkiewicz. I don't know if she's got a title run in her, but all of a sudden it looked like she was on the brink of being out of the organization, and she's coming all the way back. Small favorite in your eyes, not big enough. So I'm picking up what you're putting down there. You mentioned Vanessa Demopoulos. She's on this card as well. She's going to take on Kanako Murata here. Murata is a rather large favorite at 355. If Vanessa wins, we know she's going to jump into somebody's arms. I don't know if Joe Rogan's doing the fight or not. Is she live here in this one, or do you think that the number is priced accordingly?
Man, I just have such a hard time imagining she catches a submission, and I think the problem is she's just not going to be in positions that win her rounds. Kanako Murata, she was a world team grappler for Japan. She has such high-level wrestling. And I think the fact that she has just like such high level wrestling, she took down and controlled Miranda Marcos for the better part of that, 15-minute fight. The only person we've seen her really have trouble with grappling is Virna Jandiroba, which in retrospect, no problem with having trouble with Virna Jandiroba. Vanessa Demopoulos, great on the mat. I love her jiu-jitsu. I just think she's going to be working off of her back for 15 minutes here. And I can't imagine her catching Murata with a submission. So I think that's why we see the line where it is. If you are taking a stab on Demopoulos, though, for sure take a stab on her by submission, because I don't see her winning any other way.
Only about 45 seconds. Got to ask you about the main event with King Green back in there. Is Bobby live? Big underdog to Grant Dawson.
I can't imagine he's live here. As much as he looked really good grappling last time out, I think we have to put that in context and realize that it was Tony Ferguson, and who looks like a shell of himself at this point. And, you go to the fights before that, and, he had trouble with Drew Dober. He had Makhachev is one that, anybody would have trouble with. He seemed to be starting to lose steam against Jared Gordon before that fight got stopped. And meanwhile, we're talking about Grant Dawson, who has been steamrolling guys who can wrestle. He steamrolled Jared Gordon. He steamrolled Mark Madsen. He steamrolled Damir Azmagulov. Look, I think this is the perfect spot here for Grant Dawson to sort of stake his claim in the lightweight division.
And don't think I don't see that Troy Aikman picture over your right shoulder. It is fantastic. America's quarterback. Dan, always appreciate it, my friend. Enjoy the fights. Cash some tickets. We'll see you next week. We're going to D.C. next. Reed Kuhn next here on First Strike. Start your morning with VSiN Daily Morning. That's Josh Applebaum's going to give you every piece of info you need to be ready for betting the day's biggest games in just 15 minutes. He's going to discuss line movement, injuries, and what you need to be looking at before you place those wagers. So make the VSiN Daily Morning Bets podcast part of your morning routine. Download and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We now go out to the nation's capital, catch up with our guy Reed Kuhn, who had the whole week off because we had the week off, because the UFC had the week off. And Reed, because my mother is much more observant than I am, during the week off, did you spruce up the backdrop a little bit? You got some new additions over there. What do you have?
Yeah, this is our favorite time of year in the house for the holiday season, Halloween, of course, but it's also the best time of year to be in Virginia. We're going to be cooking. We're going to be having friends over. I had to spice things up just a little bit since this is definitely a bar that's going to get some use over the next season.
It looks fully stocked, so I'm glad you have that thing ready to roll for all the friends and family coming over to celebrate, as you can only do, my friend. Can't wait to see what's on the menu. That's why you got to follow him, as I do, at Fightnomics, the author of the book of the same name. Reed, let's get to this fight card, because when I look at Grant Dawson, I'm assuming the models normally like those wrestlers. We see that. And they normally like the fighter that's going to be 8 years the junior of Bobby King Green. Are the numbers properly aligned in your estimation, what the models are showing you, or should Grant Dawson arguably be a bigger favorite?
Yeah, this is our favorite time of year in the house for the holiday season, Halloween, of course, but it's also the best time of year to be in Virginia. We're going to be cooking. We're going to be having friends over. I had to spice things up just a little bit since this is definitely a bar that's going to get some use over the next season. You called out two very important things, and you're right. My models tend to be skewed towards wrestlers, towards grapplers, and Dawson's numbers are pretty remarkable on that front. The guy is relentless trying to get the fight to the ground. He spends 53% of all octagon time controlling people on the mat, and that is more than twice the nearest other fighter on this entire fight card. So he is the best grappler by a long shot. That said, even though he's younger, even though he's a grappler, I'm not seeing a ton of value in the line here. And that's because Bobby Green is just a more seasoned veteran. He doesn't get submitted easily, and he's elusive. He's elusive on his feet. He's elusive with takedown defense. And so I think this is going to be a chase for a while. I think Dawson's going to be chasing Bobby Green around, and it might take time to develop. Now, I personally think Dawson wins the fight, laying 4-1 ish isn't really the way to go here. I think you might want to combine that with some sort of over, like a 2.5. I think it takes him time to wear down Green. And I'm also not super confident of what happens in the 4th and 5th round. We haven't seen Dawson there versus Green being a more seasoned guy. So there are some question marks here. Liking the favorite, but just not enough to lay the juice straight up.
Reed, and that's interesting to me because you mentioned it. We haven't seen Dawson here in a 4th and 5th, right? Because it's the main event. So it'll be the first time he's in that role. Now, it is juiced. You can get plus money if you think this can hit the cards here at plus $1.70 over 4.5. To go to the cards without picking a winner, you can get plus $1.95. You don't even have to pick a winner. Because Bobby is the veteran, we've seen him gas a little bit at times too. Is this one of those fights where all of a sudden, if it does get to the 4th and 5th, to your point, we just don't know what these guys are going to look like if Dawson can't get those takedowns? He doesn't want to be standing with the king for 25 minutes.
Yeah, Bobby Green, he no-sells the punches. I find it kind of annoying, and yet it's actually quite effective. His defense is really good statistically on paper, and his accuracy is also good. So he actually wins the point striking contest against Dawson, maybe, at least in each of their careers. He's done better than Dawson has in point striking. So that's why I'm a little concerned about having to lay such a big price. That said, when it did go to the cards over 3 rounds, Dawson has won clear victories. Green's been a little bit more hit or miss. And it's not like he has 5-round experience either. It's just when it goes to the cards, he tends to go to the cards a lot. So that's why I think I might want to lean the over, because Dawson has hit late submissions before, and he likes to backpack people. And that's one of those great positions where you get multiple attempts at the same submission. And so I think it takes time to develop, but Dawson could get a late shot at it. That's why I don't want to necessarily go all 5 rounds to the cards, but a late finish or simply over 2.5 and Dawson winning might bring that price down just a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Picking up what you're putting on there. Just Dawson by sub at any point of the fight would be plus $1.30 if you did not want to lay that big price tag there on the overwhelming favorite. We have similar numbers in the co-main event here that we're seeing on a Tuesday. Joe Pyfer back in there against Abdul Razak Al Hassan. And so Al Hassan, we know he's got power. And again, this is very similar. Right now, it's even a wider gap in age here because Pyfer is 11 years the junior. What are the numbers showing you here? Again, is there a live dog scenario possibly?
This is one I got to sit back and watch. Joe Pyfer is still new enough to the UFC where I don't have sufficient data on him. Now, Al Hassan has been around a while. That guy is a knockout artist. So clearly, if you're backing that guy, you're going all in, and you might as well go for a finish. But Pyfer, those younger guys might be a little bit more resilient. So if he survives the early storm, then it's a question mark in the later round. So this is when I got to sit back. I just don't have enough data on both sides to run the model.
Absolutely love it. And that's why when the model doesn't show that you got it, it's one of those pass marks that Reed has in his book. I know you've got a lot of data on Joaquin Buckley and certainly Alex Morono here. This is a stylistic matchup for me when I look at it with the flash of a Buckley versus kind of the steady as she goes. And Alex, is Alex live in this one, or do you think Buckley should be a bigger favorite?
Well, Alex is always live because he is a tricky guy. He comes in unsuspecting. He doesn't necessarily have the build. This is going to be weird, diametrically opposed physiques in this matchup, I think. Buckley clearly with the knockout power, 7 knockdowns to his credit. And Alex Morono has been dropped 4 times. His defense is okay. It's not great, but Buckley is going to be the rangier fighter. And so he probably has that early advantage. I do worry about Buckley's cardio, being able to go the 3 rounds. Morono is kind of a comeback kid, and I've had him in that spot before. He's down on round 1. You're getting a much better price. You live bet him for the comeback. But the lean here, at least early, is for Buckley, and that means I might end up going for a prop, like an early finish. I think just the 2 outcomes, the 2 fighters are correlated. It's probably Buckley early or Morono late.
Now, when you say that, Reed, that's fascinating, that you might look to play something on Buckley early. If it, let's say we get out of 5 and Morono's probably down a round, right? Because we know Buckley's a much faster starter. Would you look for the in-game possibility that you mentioned there if Morono doesn't take a ton of damage, because we know the cardio is going to last for Alex? So it's almost a two-way play that you can get significant plus money at.
Absolutely. And Morono, I said he's been dropped 4 times. So has Buckley. And technically, his knockdown rate defensively is worse than Morono. So he has taken some big shots and he's gone down a little bit more easily. It's just closing that range. Buckley's going to have a big reach advantage. He's a southpaw. That's why I think early on he's gonna cause trouble, but he needs to get an early finish. So overall, I wouldn't necessarily play the money line one way or the other. I might be looking for a live betting opportunity.
Love that information there. Let's talk about Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Again, I talked about her earlier, where her career has been a fascinating arc to watch at 115, and we thought she'd be champion. That didn't happen. It looked like maybe she's on the way out with 3 losses in a row, and now she's turned it around. But then she's got Deanna Belbita waiting in her wings here, and Belbita's small underdog here, plus $1.40, and there's that 10-year age gap again. Is the veteran Kowalkiewicz okay in this spot, or again, you looking at the younger fighter here?
Yeah, I think I'm looking at the younger fighter here. So first of all, yeah, huge age difference, and you got to wonder who's going which direction in their career. Kowalkiewicz, if you look more closely at that record, yeah, she's rebounded with some wins, but she only has 1 win over an active UFC fighter since 2016. So she's picked up some wins along the way. Those are not currently fighters on the roster. Her only win over an active fighter is Vanessa, who's actually fighting on this card as well. So you got to wonder if she's still in it at 38. But she's also a striker. She's not going to be taking this to the ground. And when you look at the striking metrics of these 2 matched up, they're actually very, very similar, but Belbita is going to look like she is in a different weight class. She's going to be much taller, much rangier. She's equally good with accuracy. And so when you combine that with a range advantage, I think you might see her causing problems early with Karolina trying to close the distance and having trouble. Now, she's a little bit more technical. Karolina is. She has better defense. But I just think Belbita, with the youth, the range, the pace, she's going to be putting on a busier pace. Those all tell me that there's an upset here, and it might be close. It might be close on the cards, but at plus 140, I might take that, and I might even go just by decision and get even bigger value on an upset.
Got a minute to go. Drew Dober is a very exciting fighter. We know that. So is Ricky Glenn. When you look at Glenn as a massive dog here, are the numbers showing you that maybe in a firefight, you got a real puncher's chance at plus 340?
Yeah, 2 southpaws who love to slug it out. This one on paper is one of the closest matchups I've seen lately. They are almost identical. You go down the line, similar size, similar age, similar knockdown power. They both hit hard. They both scored some knockdowns. They've also both taken knockdowns. I actually think this turns into a firefight and someone's going to get knocked down. So trying to pick who it is hard. But the line is so wide. I might try to take a flyer on Glenn by knockout for a shocker, and you're going to get really good odds on that.
8-1 right now if you like Glenn the dog via KO. Reed, great stuff as always, my friend. And again, it is officially spooky season, so we're going to keep looking at your every week, see what you got back there. Appreciate it as always. Give a follow on X at Fightnomics. When we come back, we're going to Chicago to catch up with Jordan Sherwood. Come on back. It is First Strike here on VSiN. We continue this edition of First Strike. Dave Ross here in Las Vegas. Let's go out to the second city. Jordan Sherwood in Chicago. What on ESPN 1000? We could talk about the Cubs being in the White Sox 0-4. What is going on with sports in Chicago, Jordan?
Look, when we're getting excited about Connor Bedard winning faceoffs in preseason hockey,
Oh boy,
that's when you know we've got issues in the second city.
We got to pick it up, Chicago. All right. Hopefully,
Please.
by the time we talk next week, maybe there's a Bears victory in there. When we look at this card here, I know you've got some leans, and I want to talk about one right off the top. It's a fight that I haven't talked a lot about. Bill Algeo in there against Alexander the Great Ape Hernandez, and Alexander's had an interesting UFC career, we'll put it that way. He's a small dog here at plus $1.20. Bill coming in about minus $1.42 we're seeing here on a Tuesday. What's your lean on this one?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, with every Alexander Hernandez fight, you have to wait until weigh-ins, until you make an official decision. You got to see how that weight cut is going and how he takes the fight. But look, what we do know about Alexander Hernandez is that he's probably got about a round and a half in him, and then the tables are turned. And when you look at a fighter like Bill Algeo, who I think has surprised a lot of fighters and a lot of handicappers just about how well-rounded he is and that he doesn't slow down. I mean, when I think of a Bill Algeo fight, it reminds me of Rocky II when Mac is telling Apollo Creed, the man just kept coming after you. That's what Bill Algeo does. He does not stop. The motor keeps running. And that's why I like Bill Algeo as the favorite. I think that he's not going to be threatened by the power and the physicality of Alexander Hernandez and is going to be able to withstand that early onslaught, if you will, and take over in the later rounds, whether it be and likely maybe finish Alexander Hernandez inside the distance, either on the ground or on the feet. I just think that Bill Algeo's tough enough, been around the block, seen everything he needs to see for me to warrant him being the favorite this early in the week and as we get closer to fight time.
Let's just solve it once and for all right here. Did Balboa beat the count to win the belt from Apollo?
Oh, you're talking about in the second one?
Yeah,
Look, very questionable.
Very questionable refereeing.
Lou Filippo was the referee. I mean, the Mills Lane, if you will, of Rocky movies.
So good.
I'm going to side with him.
Okay, we're going to go with Lou and say that it was official. Rocky got the belt at the end of Rocky II. Alex Morono is one of those fighters, maybe in the Rocky mold, where he just keeps coming forward, it looks like a little bit. Can take some punches, but sometimes not too many punches. Joaquin Buckley, we know, very exciting, very flashy, likes to get things done earlier rather than late. Can Morono withstand that early barrage we think would get from Joaquin and possibly be live here plus $1.54?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of recency bias that Morono is the underdog here. People going back to the catchweight short notice fight that Santiago Ponzinibbio caught him late. I mean, a fight that Morono was winning pretty handily for 2.5 rounds until he got clipped and knocked out by, obviously the well-rounded, especially from the striking standpoint, in Ponzinibbio. Joaquin Buckley certainly has power, and we get that. But I don't really look at Alex Morono as a guy that's going to be knocked out and that you question his chin. I mean, he's been in there with Semi the Jedi and, Donald Cowboy Cerrone, Tim Means. We just saw him. Great performance. And he withstood that and got the win. So I think just the well-roundedness, the toughness, the grittiness. And again, there's a lot of fighters that, like we were just talking about with Bill Algeo, that cardio holds up. They just keep pressuring you, keep coming after you. And Joaquin Buckley, we have seen in his previous fights struggle with guys that are in his face, pressuring him and trying to get the fight to the ground or just dirty up the fight. So I think at plus money, Alex Morono is certainly worth a look because I'm not worried about the power of Buckley and the chin not holding up in Alex Morono's case.
So when we look at the total rounds prop here, and we get it with Alex that the cardio is going to be there, right? So if he can withstand the punishment early, then he might be very live late. Is it late enough that you take a nibble at plus money for over 2.5 rounds at plus $1.45? Heck, you can say the fight goes the distance without picking a winner, you get plus $1.70? Or do you think there's finishing potential for Morono late here against Buckley?
I like I'm picking up what you're putting down to quote you, Dave. I think there is some value in there. Yeah, Joaquin Buckley is certainly known as a guy that has knockout power. He looked great with that head kick knockout of Andre Fiallo and, Albert Duraev, the two previous wins that he's had. But I think it's a guy that also could go to the judges' scorecard. So Morono certainly isn't a finisher in my mind, even though he had the guillotine finish his last time out. So I think, yeah, there is, if you're leaning on the Morano side, for sure. But there's certainly, value in the Buckley side as well and going the over of 2.5.
Let's talk about the Hulk. He's back in here again. Ian Cutelaba is going to be in there against Philippe Lins. And when I look at Cutelaba, it's been a perplexing fighter to back sometimes financially throughout his past. Because, again, man, he looks great, and then sometimes you go, how in the world did that just happen? He's out of there in no time at all. What type of Cutelaba could we see? Is he going to be as reckless as he normally is against a guy like Lins? And right now, you're seeing him, if you think he can get it done by KO, TK, or DQ, plus $1.30. So that seems to be the favored method if you want to back the Hulk.
Yeah, see, it's kind of funny. So, I mean, I get the theme that I was talking about in the previous two fights, guys that pressure, or in the case of like Alexander Hernandez, a guy that struggles after, a round and a half. Cutelaba is the same guy. He's just like a cannon right out of the gates looking to get the finish. I like the Cutelaba side on this type of fight and this type of matchup because I just don't think there's a lot of athleticism in Philippe Lins, a guy that moved from heavyweight to light heavyweight. And granted, he's won all 3 fights that he's fought at 205 here, kind of a resurgence of his career. But I think it might be just too much athleticism, too much physicality and power for Cutelaba. So I do hope that we see vintage Cutelaba, that he is out of the gates trying to get this finish in the first 5 minutes, because I think Philippe Lins does not have the foot movement, the athleticism, and the chin to withstand Cutelaba really coming after him and trying to get him out of there in the first 5 minutes. If it does not happen, then I'm on the side of Lins. I probably would bet this fight live. Get Lins at plus money because he'd be down the first round, and him to get the finish against Cutelaba, because Cutelaba is not the same fighter as we get to rounds 2 or 3.
And again, when you see this for this potential 3-round fight, it is even money if you think it gets past 7.5 minutes. Would you look at a Cutelaba KO prop where you get the plus money? And if that doesn't happen in the first round, are you looking, that's the live spot you're getting in with Lins possibly, that this fight's going to go a little bit longer, but might not go that much longer because Cutelaba, sometimes the gas tank goes.
Yeah, the gas tank goes and he forgets to put his hands up and prevent fights and strikes go to his chin. Yeah, I like that. I like that strategy. Cutelaba early, inside round 1, maybe a KO. You double that up for some a little bit of more value. But if not, you're betting this fight live. You're waiting till it gets to that second round, and then you're on the Lins side.
Yeah, we never had these options years ago. Now you do. So very astute observation there for that in-game wagering. When you look at the main event, and I think most MMA fans, we've got an affinity for the King, Bobby Green, because of the hands and the shows he's put on throughout his UFC career. We know that Grant Dawson feels like maybe the next in the lightweight division. Don't know about the hands yet, but we know about the grappling. Can Bobby stuff those and make this a longer fight for the kid that's not really been in deeper waters? Yes, he's had some 3-round fights, but potentially 4 or 5. Or do you think this is easy work for the youngster at 29?
No, this is a good test. I mean, Bobby Green is a veteran. He's been in there with some of the best. I mean, I've obviously when he was in there with Makhachev and took that fight on short notice, he got taken to the ground immediately. But most people do against Makhachev. Dawson's not the same type of grappler, but I do think that he's got a freight train way to win if he gets his fight to the ground. And I don't think Bobby Green's stand-up defense is as good as it once was. So Grant Dawson needs to be smart about this fight. Do not mix boxing with Bobby Green, because he's very slick, very elusive, and he still packs a punch and some power. But I think Grant Dawson is good enough, dominating enough, kind of what we saw, 2 weeks ago. Dawson can get this fight to the ground against Bobby Green and get a submission, which, Bobby Green has not been submitted in quite some time, and he's been there with some of the best grapplers out there. But I think Grant Dawson can utilize some cardio, utilize that grappling top game to get Bobby Green out of there in that form. And I think there's probably some very strong value in a submission prop for Grant Dawson to get his hand raised.
Plus 235 for sub, plus $1.30 by decision, which you're not advocating for, would be the 235 number. Plus $1.30 via sub. Now, my only concern, Jordan, with younger, look, 29, right? And he's not like it's 23, but I worry about adrenaline dump a little bit. When do you think that happens? Because you saw where the round prop is. You can get some plus money if you think this goes deeper into the night here in Vegas. Is this something that happens sooner or later in this fight?
Yeah, no, Grant Dawson's a guy that's had some later finishes in his career, and certainly, yeah, it'll be a test now to go 5 rounds. A guy that's been in there, and a guy in Bobby Green whose cardio does hold up. We know that he could go hard, for 5 rounds. So, yeah, maybe some of those later props. Again, the other type of combinations I always log. Grant Dawson to win round 3 to start. Grant Dawson to win round 4 to start. So maybe there is some value there, but I think Dawson should be the sizable favorite as he is. Avoid the stand up. Look for maybe a mid to late round finish by Grant Dawson.
Great stuff, Jordan Sherwood. Go Bears. We'll catch you
All right, bear down.
next week. That's going to do it for this edition of First Strike. Thanks for watching, and thanks to Britton Hess and Rob Moreno as well, doing a great job behind the glass. We'll see you next week right here on First Strike.